started with the big news, which comes. I'll just outline the scenario that occurred yesterday. We had a flurry of developments. We had Israel striking Beirut, bombing Lebanon, still bombing Lebanon, to be quite honest. But in this strike on Lebanon, Iran said that it was going to retaliate. Trump, it appears, was very keen on not letting this happen. Essentially, was a panic negotiating with Iran, gave a lot of newer concessions, for example, lifting the blockade immediately. And now we have the memorandum of understanding that was signed later in the evening yesterday. Now, Pepe, I know you have a column coming out on this. Maybe you can help us understand why it was now that this strike that Israel conducted. Of course, Iran has already struck Israel over its attacks on Lebanon. And now it seems like this particular threat led to an actual agreement. Again, the memorandum of understanding, not a peace deal. But maybe you can help us understand what happened and why it happened.
Right. This column is probably coming out Tuesday. Tuesday. I try to detail and with background as well and information that we had from our Iranian and Pakistani sources for the past almost 3 weeks. There's an important contextualization for you, Danny, and for our audience. What is now the Iranians are billing it as the Islamabad understandings or memorandum. It was called the Islamabad Accord by the Pakistanis themselves. And we broke the story of the Islamabad Accord, Larry Johnson and I, in a previous channel. It was called Power Shift. And after we had 2 breaking news back to back, it was simply canceled by a direct order by the US government to Google. Shut them down with no warning, nothing whatsoever. We had 2 shows, one on a Tuesday, one on a Friday. And over the weekend, our channel was shut down. Last week, we came back with a new channel. It's called Transition Protocol. And on Friday last week, Larry and I, in our new, still small channel, we have to start all over again. We broke the story that it was the MOU was practically a done deal. And why could we break that? Because our sources are directly from the table. They are Pakistani mediators. And that's the reason why Larry and I are engaged in this project. Because we are there are very, very few or practically none analysts anywhere who have directly from the table by the Pakistanis. And of course, this information can be later confronted and presented to the Iranians, and they say yes, no comments, etc. And that's why we are involved. So we knew that an Islamabad Accord was practically a done deal, barring last-minute alterations by the American side, which is exactly what happened this weekend. So this weekend, Arakchi, very few people know that, he was on a secret mission in Pakistan. Arakchi spent the weekend in Islamabad discussing with the mediators and basically telling once again the Trump administration, look, we have already given you two very important demands 2 weeks ago at least. Number one, we're not going to discuss the Iranian nuclear dossier before any formal ending of the war, not only the war against us, but the war of Israel against Lebanon. And number two, if you insist on crossing thresholds, and if you insist on imposing other red lines on us, we're going to attack Israel directly. and they were locked and loaded to attack Israel this weekend from Saturday to Sunday. They were about to do it. So this was the straw that broke the cage match emperor of barbarous camel's back. He finally understood that the Iranians were very, very, very serious. And they wouldn't wait for anything, and they would go for broke against Israel. So this was the main reason why we had, they say there is an electronic signing. The Iranians did not confirm that there was an electronic signing by Ghalibaf especially. The Americans are saying that Trump and Vance already signed it electronically. The Iranians, so far, they left it hanging in the air. Basically, they were saying a very important statement by the Supreme National Security Council, which I include in my column. They say that they will sign only after the definitive order by leader Mojtaba Khamenei. So we may assume that this is still in the air, right? And it would happen, let's say, within the next 48 hours. So between today and maybe tomorrow night, right? And of course, this all relates to what's going to be announced officially on the 19th, Friday in Geneva. So a lot of stuff can happen from now to the 19th, especially after another derailment attempt by the Death Cult in West Asia. And once again, the Iranians told the Americans, look, if you sign and if we sign the MOU with us, we will deal with Israelis by ourselves. And the Americans more or less are admitting that once the MOU is signed, Israel is on its own. If they want to derail it, Iran is going to respond them, and the Americans won't do anything to prevent it. So that changes the equation completely. But Danny, this is all very much in the air, right? It's we are still in a I said, he said phase. From now to the next 3-4 days, it's very, very tricky. Once we have this formal announcement on Friday, that changes the equation, because then we're going to have the full terms of the MOU, and the Iranians are promising within the next 48 hours to reveal all the points. Because so far, this is also important, Araghchi has been taking Himalayan amounts of flack in Iran because a lot of people are accusing him of selling out. Of course, they still don't know the full terms. And the terms changed drastically this weekend, as you mentioned in the beginning. Trump made extra concessions, but these are not extra concessions. This is something that he had agreed previously. But then he started to once again, extra demands and change the terms that were agreed over 2 weeks ago. So it's back to where we were in the beginning, when the Islamabad Accord, as it was described, was on the verge of being signed. And we also had a confirmation that I discussed this with Larry as well. Trump had 6 opportunities to sign this deal within the last 2 to 3 weeks. And at the last minute, he came up with something different. The whole thing was already written, just needed to be signed 6 times. And this weekend, probably we had the 7th. And he couldn't escape it anymore. Because the Iranians said, look, that's it. This is our deadline. And among the deadline, the Iranians were saying, look, the money, you have to disburse the money that you owe us until the end of this month. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. So that explains, among other things, why there was, once again, that famous Emirati plane landing in Tehran with lots of cash inside, which was part of the UAE payment for Iran to please don't bomb us. And once again, the Pakistanis, we know this we got this information from the table. The Pakistani told us, look, we brokered this UAE flight to Tehran to pay $2 billion in cash. So the thing was advancing. And this weekend, we had everything in place for the signing of the MOU. And at the last minute, Trump tried to change it, probably for the last time, because now it's theoretically a done deal. But we still have all these days until Friday for the final confirmation, right? So it's immensely fluid situation. Every hour there's a big development. But from an Iranian point of view, if we look at the big picture, it's a stunning achievement. They got almost everything that they wanted, at least in paper or electronically signed. Now, we don't know what's going to happen next. But the 14 points that they were, pressing for 2 to 3 weeks now, they got practically everything.
Yeah. And we saw Pepe, and this is, I think, going to be a big problem. I mean, Israel is feigning this absolute rage, right? You have Smotrich, you have Netanyahu. They're all saying that Lebanon is not part of this deal and that they do not take orders from the United States. I mean, it's a huge performance right now. But immediately after these strikes, Trump did something that he doesn't often do, which is say anything against what Israel does. But he said that those attacks that happened, which led to this mad dash to get to this deal, should not have happened, that these attacks should not have happened, and that he said all sides need to stand down. But he said separately in a phone call that the IDF should not be in Lebanon at all. And now we are hearing that J.D. Vance is saying the opposite of this. There's a lot of games, it seems like, and now J.D. Vance is saying, well, Israeli troops, Lebanon, it's not part of the deal. This seems like a big mess, but I think what you just said there in terms of Iran really facilitating even getting to this point is really the story here, that it was Iran saying, well, we're pointing our missiles at Israel, we're going to launch them soon, seemed to have generated a lot of activity right after that. But your thoughts?
Absolutely. And they stood firm all the way. They did not abdicate from, of the 14 points, maybe they relented a little bit on 1 or 2. But the most important, the sequence of events, the sequencing was established by the Iranians. First, you end all wars. Then we start talking about Strait of Hormuz. Okay, we are willing to have the Strait of Hormuz totally free of any tolls or administration fees or whatever, but for 30 days. And then after that, when we start phase 2, which is to discuss the elements of a deal, we can impose everything that we want, because we're already talking about the Omanis about that. And of course, number 3 is Lebanon, which was the most important thing related to number 1. Lebanon is part of the whole MOU and the deal, if the deal will be signed in the future, period. And that's exactly where Israel comes in, because they are bombing one of the key elements of the MOU. Lebanon is a key element of the MOU, and the Iranians were fighting for Lebanon non-stop. So this is the, I would say, margin that the death cult has for the moment. They will continue to punish Lebanon, to attack Lebanon, harass Lebanon, bomb Lebanon, whatever. And the Iranians are already said to the Americans, look, it's part of the deal. As long as you don't do anything about it, as long as you don't help Israel, okay, we will deal with Israel by ourselves, which is probably what's going to happen, I would say, in the next few days or weeks. If Israel doesn't stop, Iran will deal with them directly, which was exactly what they were about to do this weekend. And that's what's changed in the equations. So Tel Aviv, they have every reason to be terrified. They are on their own, essentially.
Pepe, help clarify the Strait of Hormuz situation and when it comes to this memorandum of understanding, because on the one hand, there's all this talk about, okay, the Strait of Hormuz is completely open for 30 days, and then under Iranian arrangements, and then there's others who are saying, like the U.S. side, well, no, it's just completely open, and they don't mention with no tolls, but there seems to be an agreement that Iran will be charging these service fees, and that will be overlooked. But I'm curious on what the actual situation is, and whether you believe Iran will continue to exercise leverage over the Strait of Hormuz should this agreement not be met up to standards by the United States, if the U.S. does not meet up to the agreements or the conditions in it.
Whatever happens, Danny, and whatever is the American attitude, the legal status of the Strait of Hormuz will be something completely different compared to before the war. They will organize a system to apply. They will probably euphemistically call them administrative tax fees or whatever, environmental fees, security for freedom of navigation, etc., which they are already, once again, discussing all that with the Omanis. So this is inevitable. For the first 30 days, and that, of course, assuming the Americans are going to fulfill their end of the bargain, which is to end their Trump-ordered blockade. The strait will be completely, there will be no tolls, no fees, etc., for 1 month. When they start the next phase, which is to discuss the actual possible deal, that's another story. And then Iran, and this is part of the MOU. Let me see if I can find it here, where they talk direct about the Strait of Hormuz. Security, no, I cannot find it at the moment. But I remember very well that among the 14 points, the Strait of Hormuz will already be part of a provisional settlement already in the 60 days following the first 30 days. Right. Yes, you yes, got the whole thing. Okay, right. The opening of the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days. Exactly. This is the language. Under Iranian arrangements. Translation. Yes, they will have their administrative fees. Absolutely. And of course, this was agreed between both parties. The Americans essentially agreed. They know that they cannot force Iran not to have control over the Strait of Hormuz. Period. This is their great strategic victory.
Yeah.
Of the whole war. They will never abandon it. Never. Even under a total fire, maximum pressure, whatever, all that crap.
Yeah.
The thing is, the U.S. agreement capable. I posed this question in the call, Danny. Will the U.S. for the first time in in memory be agreement capable? None of us believe in that, of course.
Right. No. And now the question is, Pepe, you've called, I know that in your upcoming column, you are calling this a huge multipolar breakthrough. You talk about the role of Pakistan. It was actually the Pakistani prime minister who first announced that this deal was done on X. Now talk about this, because there was a lot of moving pieces here, and Iran and the United States were certainly dealing with a multitude of mediators. We know the Gulf countries were very, very concerned about what would happen if hostilities were to restart. So talk about this as what you have termed like a multipolar breakthrough.
Absolutely. And this is what Larry and I were particularly interested from the beginning, that we would have access to what was being discussed at the table by the Pakistani mediators, unfiltered. So we were getting practically one briefing a day for the past few days. This is huge, enormous. And of course, they were not only mediating between Washington and Tehran directly, it was the only state that was conducting the mediation at the highest level. They were getting help from a lot of players. The most important one, which is acknowledged at this statement by the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, Qatar. They mentioned by name only two states, Pakistan, the main mediators, and Qatar. And they expressed their appreciation to both. But in the background, we also had Turkey, especially Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. So everybody was involved. And they were also involved into helping the Pakistanis to explain to the UAE, essentially to explain to MBZ, look, you bet on the wrong horse. You better try to find an understanding with Iran, or you're going to be in deep, deep trouble. And apparently MBZ got the message. And that explains the famous Emirati flight to Tehran with $2 billion. So Pakistan was coordinating all that, which in itself is immensely impressive. A lot of people know that I have deep reservations concerning the Pakistani government. A lot of people know that I was a huge supporter of Imran Khan. But at the same time, we, as independent analysts, we have to practice realpolitik. And of course, recognize when there is a state that is doing an outstanding mediation work, which was the case with Pakistan so far. And they were in a unique position because very close relations with Tehran. For instance, I think I mentioned this with you or in other podcasts as well. When there was a key visit to talk to Mojtaba Khamenei face to face in Iran, the Iranian Minister of Interior, he took a delegation of Pakistani Shiite